Coming up on Theater Talk.
You can be the hero in an interracial play or in any kind of play if your existence makes better the welfare or the life of somebody white. You know, if you are enhancing the life of somebody white. But if you want something for yourself or for other black people,
then you're a threat.
Then you're a threat. Right. And so it's still that way, you know.
Theater Talk is made possible in part by the CUNY TV Foundation. From New York City, this is Theater Talk. I'm Susan Haskins.
And I'm Michael Riedel of the New York Post. Now, you know, Susan, we've just come off the Broadway season where we've had a lot of talk about the big Broadway musicals, but my favorite musical of the season is to be found off-Broadway at the Public Theater. It's called Here Lies Love. It is about Imelda and Ferdinand Marcos and their reign in the Philippines in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. It stars the very lovely Ruthie Ann Miles as Imelda. Welcome to Theater Talk. Good friend of ours, Jose Llana, who I remember fondly from On the Town. Doesn't seem it's that long ago, but I'm afraid it was, Jose.
It was quite long ago.
But Jose, you do
I
not...
was 12.
Yeah, right.
Right.
You haven't aged,
Well,
I must say. You still look great. Who plays Ferdinand Marcos. And it has a score by a theater newcomer, David Byrne, you may know from another era of the music business, famous singer and band member of Talking Heads. Welcome to Theater Talk. So, David, what got you thinking about Imelda and Ferdinand Marcos as subjects for your first entree into the big musical theater world?
I was always interested in her. She was kind of a very large character, powerful character with lots of outrageous behavior, and I knew little bits of the story. And then some years ago, I read that she loved going to dance clubs, discos, Studio 54, all that stuff.
Your era, really, right?
Sort of, yeah. My era. I was at different clubs, but yeah, it was the same time. And she liked it so much, she had a mirror ball put into one of the floors of her.
It was on the top floor of their house.
And yeah, New York townhouse. And I did a little research. I found some videos of her dancing with an arms dealer under the under the mirror ball.
Gotta love her.
And I thought, here's this person with all this story attached comes with the soundtrack. She has surrounded herself with this, whatever, frothy music that some might be in some ways appropriate as a vehicle for telling the story. So then I just backed up and did started reading books and did the research and kind of outlined the story.
Did you immerse yourself back in that club era sound then to try to get a hold of it, or it just comes?
Yeah, a little bit. I didn't want it to be completely retro.
Yeah.
I wanted it to kind of allude to that era, but not be just kind of a slavish imitation.
You're credited for the score with Fatboy Slim.
Yeah.
Who is that, and how did you work together on this score?
He's an English DJ or dance music artist, I guess you would say, who had a number of hits kind of in the pop charts and in the dance clubs and things like that didn't sound like disco era, but they were very much about getting people to dance. And I liked that they were a lot of them were a little bit different one from the other. They weren't exactly one particular genre. So I just kind of cold called him out of the, cold called him out of the blue, just said, I have this project I want to do, and if you're interested.
Did you know him?
No, I've never met the
wow.
guy.
Hey, I'm an Imelda Marcos fan too.
What do I have to lose?
That's
you can only say no.
Sure, it's true. But that's the only approach you can have to the theaters. What do you have to lose? You might as well take the big risk and take the gamble and go with what you're interested in.
He was passing through New York, so we each got a beer and we went for a walk on one of the piers on the west side there. And I was kind of pitching the thing and telling him the story. Then the parks people came by and said, "You can't have beer."
and the rest is musical theater history. Ruthie, let me ask you, since you play Imelda Marcos, what in your research and your understanding of the character was her fascination with this kind of music, with the club scene, with Manhattan sort of high life of that era?
I think the life in the Philippines then was, you know, closed off, and they didn't have these big celebrities coming from the Philippines. So she would look across the ocean and see the United States and their dance parties, and they would, you know, she would see all these, you know, celebrities or, you know, politicians and their wives traveling on these big jet planes, and so she wanted to be that. So I think when she finally got, you know, into the position with her husband that they were in, they had the money to do these things, then she was able to go and party. And so she would, one night in New York, one night in Paris.
No, she would just fly in, right, for a party and then fly
even
out.
the flight itself was a party.
Even though, I mean, clearly they're enjoying being part of the celebrity culture and enjoying partaking of the fun of the West, if you will. Do they justify it in some ways by saying we're also putting the Philippines on the map as an important world power now? We're going to show ourselves sort of Kennedy-esque like.
Absolutely. Actually, it's one of the genius lyrics that David has in one of our songs, where they're putting on a pretty face for the whole world to see. Putting kind of the mask on the actual problems and the corruption that was actually happening in the Philippines at the time, but they wanted to put on the pretty face, like Marcos and Imelda, especially Imelda actually, and especially after Marcos got sick, Imelda was the beautiful face of the image that they wanted to send out and broadcast to the world, even though there was unbelievable corruption happening inside the government.
You show her as a young, poor woman, and yet as soon as she starts to get something, she starts to shun those who are below her on the ladder, which you're setting up how oblivious she could be to how she was living such a high life in an impoverished country.
Oh, there still is. Kind of your social status in the Philippines is very important. There's a not a handful, but a small number of families who kind of run everything, and they're kind of socially accepted. And she was not quite accepted, although she was from a very important family. She was not really accepted socially. So that was kind of like, she felt a little ostracized, felt like, I think she felt like, when I get to that place, I'm going to rewrite my history a little bit, that I came from a good family, and that. But she would have it both ways. When it suited her purpose, she would say,
I'm one of you.
I'm one of you. I grew up poor. I understand your situation. And then at other times, it would be like, no, I was never poor.
Well, I was struck.
Like, well, which is it here?
Yeah, I was struck with the parallel, but this just may be the typical character of the despot. But Evita Peron did the same thing. You know, when she reinvented herself as the top of the high society, but she did everything, as Imelda says, for the people, which is when they turn on her, she can't believe that these people that she feels, I think, that she's taken care of, don't love her anymore.
The lyrics at the end, why don't you love me? And we just say that over and over, why don't you love me? Why don't you love me? And it can be, you know, imbibed with so many different emotions in there. And I love that, you know, David gave me that lyric to say so many times, because there's a little bit of, there's betrayal, there's like total cluelessness.
Right.
You know,
Club girl cluelessness.
Right, there's everything. You can really just ride that for all of its worth, and I really think that's how she feels. You know, I did it all for you, so.
She still feels that
What's
way.
your problem? And
I don't get it.
And what's his problem, Marcos?
He's sick.
Well, no, before that, but he's very ambitious. And
Oh, completely. I mean, I think it's not argued. I mean, they have so many supporters still in the Philippines, the Marcos family. There was no doubt that he was just a really masterful politician. He sort of had a purpose, and he went after it. He saw Ruthie. See, she's one in one.
She's so much like Imelda Marcos.
He saw.
So they blended together.
He saw this popular beauty queen in Manila at the time, and said, "What a great pairing for me to have as a running mate to run for president."
not only does this show have really one of the best, in the words of Ben Brantley, the best rock score, it also has this remarkable staging by Alex Timbers. But you work together, because this show is very uniquely staged, that you're in a discotheque, and the audience is in the discotheque, but then being moved around. Now tell us about, David, how that came to be.
When I first brought it to Alex Timbers and the people at the public, I said, you know, I conceive this as being kind of a club experience, that like a dance club, not like Bottom Line where you worked, where everybody's seated, but a dance club where everybody's standing around dancing. Maybe there's some seats in some areas, and then the performers take place along the periphery. So the audience is in the middle, and the performers are all around them. I said I've been to dance clubs where that's the way it happens, and there's little stages, and people come out, and there's whatever, go-go girls or a singer comes out on a tiny little stage and then goes away again. And I thought, let's start from that. But of course, Alex and David Corns, the set designer, not too long after that said, well, what if we had even more of these little stage platforms and they moved around?
They moved around.
We could reconfigure the whole situation from time to time. We could have like a runway where the performers go right through the middle of the audience. And the audience just is right up against the performers.
The audience also, to push the metaphor, but the audience also becomes the cheering crowds for the Marcoses.
But they become,
we dancing around are cheering for the tyrants.
the audience is being manipulated into moving around. So someone made the good point to me that it's a metaphor for the Filipino people who are not only manipulated into feeling, but they're manipulated into
Going with it.
And loving
Yes.
it. Sharing. I mean,
And loving it.
Now, I was going to say,
cheering.
you know this because your family fled the Marcoses,
Yes.
did they not?
I was actually born in martial law. My sister and I were both born in martial law, and my parents left in '79, and I was very young. And when they came to see the show a couple times, they of course they were cheering on their son who was performing on stage, but they got swept up in it the way that every song progressed up to that election, and they found themselves cheering, and they go, why are we cheering for?
Like
Why
that
is
song
our
in-
son playing the band that made us get out of the country? Did your parents flee for political reasons? Were they on the wrong side of the Marcoses, or?
Well, my mom and dad were huge anti-Marcos activists, and they were the exact right age to be active. They just graduated college. They just got married. But that also meant that they were also the exact right hot-headed age to be put on the list of people that.
So they were on a list, yeah.
Yeah, that the government was like, okay, keep an eye on these kids, and with martial law being so restrictive and just people couldn't, especially being a young guy and people in your 20s, there was a huge exodus happening from the Philippines.
So they came here?
They came.
I remember when the Philippines was liberated, when Mrs. Aquino took over. Were your parents here then?
We were in suburban Virginia watching it on television. Yeah.
Well, because they opened up the Marcoses' fabulous townhouse, and the Philippine people gave us tours through the townhouse, and I will never forget it. I mean,
Did you see the disco ball?
I saw the disco ball. I saw the embroidered pillows that said you can never be too fat or too rich. They had
That was here in New York?
Yes, it was here in New York. They had gold bathroom fixtures, and every floor you went through just horrified at the money that they had spent.
Now, have you guys been in touch with Imelda Marcos? Have you written to her asking for advice on the character? Do we know if has she come to see the show? I guess she can't come
hasn't
here.
come yet.
But has she heard the score? Do we know this at all?
She heard an earlier version of the
Really?
score. I know there was like
It's on YouTube, I think.
Yeah, there's like a BBC reporter who went and
Oh, really?
She's
played it
listening
for
to it on an iPod.
And did she say anything?
Oh, it's good music.
not to us.
Yeah, but you can see her bouncing around.
Yeah.
And somebody like that, that's not a legal problem to make a musical about a living person. Clearly not, but
No, she's a public figure.
no.
she's a public figure.
I bet she loves it.
That's what I was about to say. I'm sure she loves every
If she could
minute
come
of
here,
this.
I'm sure she would get a house seat to
She
go.
loves any
visit.
attention.
That would be good for you, right? To be and see there one day, look out,
I
and
think
there's
that would
Imelda.
be the only day that I've been nervous in that house. Imelda Marcos.
That's
Well, let us know if she comes, because
And-
it'll be a good story. We'll send Cindy Adams, her old friend from the New York Post,
right.
to go with her to it. So, all right, the show is called Here Lies Love down at the Public Theater.
now on CD.
Yes.
It stars Ruthie Ann Miles as Imelda, Jose Llana as Ferdinand, and with a score and book by David Byrne.
And
And
directed, what?
And directed by Alex Timmer.
Alex Timmer.
And one thing, no shoes. Did you deliberately decide to have no references to the shoes? Because that's what we all know Imelda for. And I was waiting for the shoe number.
The shoes were not discovered until maybe an hour after the Marcoses were helicoptered out. And really our story ends kind of right at that moment.
Right.
And also, Spider-Man had a shoe number that was absolutely horrendous.
Yeah,
Apart from
best
that.
to stay away from shoe
Stay
numbers.
away from shoe number.
In show business. All right, thanks a lot for being our guest tonight.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ruby, when were you brought into the show? Because you originated the role of the long-suffering wife on Broadway.
Yes. Well, the play was well on its way towards being produced by the time Lloyd was on board.
Lloyd Richards,
Lloyd Richards,
the director. Yeah.
And I was asked to, and I remember Lloyd calling to ask me would I like to read this new play that they were doing called Raisin in the Sun, and I said yes, you know, but I thought about the title, A Raisin in the Sun. Well, that's a grape that's all dried up, you know, and I wonder, is it still in the sun? Well, you know, I remember thinking about the title, you know.
When you first read the script, what was your reaction to it? Did you know this was a major play, something you hadn't
yes,
seen before?
And I remember Lloyd calling to say that he needed an answer by, I think, noon the next day, something like that. And so by the next morning, I hadn't read it yet, so I stayed in bed and read it. I was enchanted, I was intrigued, I liked it so much. It made me really sit up and pay attention. Before I finished reading it even, Lloyd called. And I told him how much I liked the play and how thrilled I was. I loved it to beneath it, you know. I told him. I said, well, I just loved it. Because I just knew that's what he wanted me to do. It didn't even cross my mind that he didn't want me to do beneath.
Beneath is the daughter of the...
Oh, Ruby, I meant to tell you. I want you to do Ruth. And here I was behind the ironing board of life again. I'd done these characters a few times in my early career.
Did you read the play too, Ossie, when she was considering doing it? And
No.
No? No? Because you came in to replace Sidney Poitier.
Yeah, after the play had been established, it was a success. And Sidney's original commitment was fulfilled. He had to go back to Hollywood, I think. And so I was brought in to replace him as Walter Lee Younger. It was a busy time. Many things were happening. And major changes were taking place all over the place politically. You know, the South was alive, and new attitudes and new thoughts were on the horizon, you know. So this happened to be one of those things that came along that fitted in with whatever was happening. So sometime along the way I got on board, but I don't remember specifically. Yeah.
Do you remember when we first went to Phil's house? And do you remember that?
Now
Phil?
that's what I was going to talk about because
I think you were there that day.
You seem for a moment to have forgotten that. Long before Lloyd was even involved, I had a reading of the play at my apartment at Central Park West.
Was I
and
there?
you read. Without you being there, we probably would never go any further.
I read Ruth?
You read Ruth then, and that was a reading we did to try to convince Sidney to do the play. And also, nobody believed it would go much further than my living room.
That it should be a Broadway show. That was an unusual development because nothing like that had been on Broadway before that I remember, where the central characters' lives were not involved with the welfare of somebody white. It was a family, and everything that was important in the world took place within that family. So no, we hadn't seen that before. It mirrored something else about black people in America that was still living with black men in particular, young men. You can be the hero in an interracial play or in any kind of play if your existence makes better the welfare or the life of somebody white. You know, if you are enhancing the life of somebody white. But if you want something for yourself or for other black people,
then you're a threat.
Then you're a threat. Right. And so it's still that way, you know.
You, of course, had an illustrious career at the New York Times and are now head of the New York Times Foundation. But you were the drama reporter.
Well, I started out as a the way most reporters started out in those days, in the mid-40s. I was a police reporter, general assignment. I covered the City Hall. And then I was about to go overseas, and Brooks Atkinson, who was then the great drama critic of the Times, called me, and I was at the United Nations, and getting my experience. And he asked me to if I'd like to join the drama department, because I had been writing pieces for the Sunday drama section on a freelance basis. And he said, you could always go overseas, why don't you try this, and I think you'll like it, and maybe you could be a critic someday. You can't view Long Day's Journey as greatness because it is autobiographical. I mean, if you didn't know it was autobiographical,
it's still
it would be a great play.
Universal play about a family.
And it tells you about, you know, you learn from that play
about yourself.
And if you didn't know it was autobiographical, if you never knew anything about his parents, it would still be a great play.
Right.
It's so honest. That's what makes it so great. And psychiatrists love to analyze it, because many have told us that analyzing that play is like having O'Neill on the couch, because it is so true psychiatrically and psychologically.
About sons and fathers.
Yes,
and,
that's right.
Is there an O'Neill play that you think is underappreciated that we should go back to and is deserving of the kind of full-scale revival that The Iceman Cometh had with Kevin Spacey last season, and that A Moon for the Misbegotten is going to get soon, I think, with Cherry Jones?
That may be the one play that, but it did have a wonderful, brilliant production.
Sure, with Colleen Dewhurst.
But after the great production of Anna Christie, which I always thought, I think you would agree,
Yes, you never
Barbara,
can tell. I mean,
was
that
kind
seems
of
like a very silly
minor
play.
and we saw that at a preview, and we were gassed. I mean, it was just.
But it depends on it happened to be that Neeson and Richardson were in love at that moment.
Right, Natasha Richardson and Liam Neeson.
The heat on the stage was palpable.
If you had a Neeson and Richardson in Desire Under the Elms, let's say,
right, yeah,
I think you'd have the same kind of
that could be probably revived.
reaction. That's a play that's underrated, I believe. Desire Under the Elms. I think there's a possibility that someone will do a great production.
Desire Under the Elms, the nicest thing about it, I think, is the justice in the Tony Award Committee not giving it 2 or 3 little nominations, but no nominations at all, because it wasn't just bad, it was really unspeakably bad. I call it Desire Under the House. It is the most grotesque, slowpoke, ridiculous, unbelievable. I didn't believe one word that came out of these actors' mouths, including A, Ann, and the.
Rock of Ages, a masterpiece of the American musical theater?
Rock of Ages advances the art of musical theater beyond anything we've seen before.
Why is that?
Well, because it's such fun, actually. It's
a minor detail.
It's a complete mess, you know, and the director was nominated for a Tony Award.
Over Arthur Lawrence.
Over Arthur Lawrence, 91 years old, great genius. But no, she was selected, and the thing is a complete mess. They serve drinks during the show, you know, which may not be a bad idea these days. It's a complete mess, but it's such fun. They communicate the fun. And this was not my music exactly, but I loved it.
1980s, yeah.
Yeah, I loved it, and I thought they kept it up all the way through. So I was very surprised to like it, but I did like it.
But Mike, you're an expert on the musical theater. Is this an important show?
I plead ignorance about this Rock of Ages. In the 1980s, I was listening to Hello Dolly and Fiddler on the Roof.
Nerd.
Yeah, so I'll admit it. So I was totally lost in that show. I knew not one song.
You're kidding. Those are the songs that everybody danced to in my high school. You didn't know a single song, a hit song from the 1980s?
I was dancing to Gypsy and the Sound of Music. And maybe
nerd.
Maybe Fiorello. Rock of Ages is sort of a watered-down Mamma Mia, which is going down some. I mean, it really, it cuts everything down to another level, like subterranean practically. And I don't know, it does appeal to a certain demographic, and you can drink during the show, which certainly gets people going. And the cast is fine.
The cast, I'm told, drinks during the show too.
I don't know. That could only help.
Jacques, you were born in Paris, and Waiting for Godot. Samuel Beckett spent a great deal of time in Paris. Good production. Is it the masterpiece that we all have been told it is?
You know, I have a little theory about this. The French gave up on theater. There's no theater in Paris. They gave up on theater about 1952 when they had a 1-2 punch. Beckett and Ionesco.
Waiting for Godot.
Begging, waiting for Godot. Ionesco with
Exit the
Exit the
King.
King. And now, 60 years later, Americans do things a little bit later than French people do. 6 years later, we have 2 of these shows which were raved about by some of the major critics. Everyone's going to go to them. Everyone's going to hate them. And everyone will decide they're never going to the theater again. The end. No more theater. It's like France.
That's it. We're done.
That's it.
Thank you.
That was fun.
Don't let them look down on us. Please don't. Like they used to do to me. Please don't. Don't let them look down on us. Please don't.
Our thanks to the Friends of Theater Talk for their significant contribution to this production. Theater Talk is made possible in part by the Frederick Lowe Foundation, the Corey and Bob Donnelly Charitable Fund, the Noel Coward Foundation, Carrie J. Fries, the Dorothy Strelson Foundation, plus public funds from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, the New York State Council on the Arts, a state agency, and the Theater Development Fund's Technical Accessibility Program, which helps provide closed captioning.
We welcome your questions or comments for Theater Talk. Thank you and good night.